Good morning, everyone. It's just after 9:30 here in Vancouver, and welcome to the UFE Prep Mentoring webinar. So you should be seeing some instructions on your screen. You should automatically be connected to the audio over the internet connection. So if you are having difficulties with audio, the plan B is for you to join us through the teleconference line, and we have dial-in instructions in step number 2 there. And if you do find yourself in the position where you have audio issues and have to call in, that line will be muted, so you won't be able to ask questions through the line. You still have to be connected to the internet and use the Q&A screen in live meeting to ask your questions. So that takes care of some of the housekeeping items, and with that, we'll get started. So my name is Laura Gregorick, and I'm CASB's Director of CA Training Office Engagement. And my role at CASB involves developing relationships with CA training offices and collaboratively engaging you in CA student development. So I'll be walking you through today's presentation, and Jennifer Reed, the Director of CASB's UFE Prep program, will also be joining us at the end of today's session, and Jennifer will be addressing your questions at that point. So Jennifer is responsible for all the aspects of our UFE Prep program, and she's been quite busy developing some great resources to help our students prepare for the UFE over the summer. And we'll be highlighting a number of those resources during our session today. So we have a number of objectives for our session. So by the end of our time together, you should be able to recognize the various components of UFE Prep and understand what a student would do to prepare for the UFE over the coming months. Also understand what a mentor does to help students prepare for the UFE, and know what resources are available to assist both you and your students, and also know how to register for the UFE Prep Mentor module. We do have a full hour together today, but we have roughly about 15 to 20 minutes of formal material to cover. So we will have plenty of time to address your questions, and if you don't have that many, we will finish early. You can submit your questions throughout the session by using that Q&A menu that I referred to at the top of your screen there. And as I did mention, that Jennifer Reed, the Director of our UFE Prep program, will be on hand to answer your questions at the end of the session. And I just wanted to note that you can also download a copy of today's presentations by clicking on the handouts icon in the top right-hand section of your screen. And that icon is the one that looks like 3 little sheets of paper. So we'll start with an overview of CASB's UFE Prep program for this year. So our UFE program spans from late May right up to the UFE dates in mid-September, and we have 3 components to the program. So we have the online UFE Prep module, and that contains resources that are situated in Desire to Learn, and that's our learning management system. We have the face-to-face classroom sessions, and we also have the evaluated simulations. So students will gain access to the online UFE Prep module on May 22nd, and they'll continue to have access right up to the UFE dates in mid-September. And the module includes a number of resources that would guide students through their UFE study. So we have the UFE simulations and guides from 2004 onward, and select simulations from before 2007, and then all of the simulations from 2007 to 2009 have been updated to reflect current standards. We also have the technical guides and tutorials for the CAS's ASB and IFRS, and some select technical guides from the first 5 CASB modules as well are in that UFE Prep module. And then we have 2 additional guides. So one outlines the steps and tips for approaching a simulation, and another that outlines the steps for debriefing a simulation. And then we have 2 corresponding planning tutorials as well that would assist students in approaching a simulation. And then the online module for students also includes access to a facilitator, and they would do that through the discussion board or through email, basically. And so then we'll move on to the classroom sessions. So the face-to-face classroom sessions take place from July 23rd to 27th and July 30th to August 3rd. And then here, students would be pretty much concentrating on how to approach and debrief UFE simulations during these sessions. And there is also some technical review as well. And then finally, the evaluated simulations. So students basically write simulations, and then reviewers evaluate the simulations, and they provide students with feedback on their performance. So students would be writing simulations of the day on July 24th and 31st. And they also write practice simulations on July 27th and August 5th. And then finally, it all culminates in a simulated UFE that they write August 7th to 9th. And that's an actual UFE writing locations wherever possible. So we do have a calendar function in the online UFE Prep module as well, and that highlights key dates for both Module 5 and UFE Prep. We also created a study plan that would provide more guidance to students on when and how to use all these online resources that are available to them, and also what's covered in the classroom portion of the UFE Prep program. But we'll cover the study plan in greater detail later on in the session. So next, we'll talk about how students can prepare for the UFE and highlight some of the resources that are available to assist them. So CASB students have been preparing for the UFE pretty much since the start of Module 1. So the technical competencies and the pervasive qualities and skills, and also the case writing experience that they've gained throughout the first 5 modules will serve them well as they attempt the UFE. And the tasks in Module 5 in particular place specific emphasis on the integration of some of these complex issues that they're facing, and they're exposed to UFE simulations throughout this module as well. So for students not in Module 5 during the spring session, we do have some suggested alternate activities to help them prepare during this period that leads up to the UFE face-to-face prep sessions. And we'll cover those in greater detail when we talk about the suggested study plan. So students also participate in CASB's UFE prep program, and again, that's including the 3 components we just discussed. And the online module would contain the resources that students would pretty much refer to for their self-directed study. Then we have the face-to-face sessions and the evaluated simulations in our UFE prep program. And then, obviously, they may also participate in some of the internal training office programs that you would offer, or others offered by an external provider as well. So next, we're going to focus on a number of tools that we've designed to assist students in their UFE study. So these tools would include an orientation guide and a binder. So this is a tool that we've created to help students track their progress as they're studying for the UFE. There's a sample study plan within that binder, and we have the guide to approaching a simulation and the 2 planning tutorials, and also the guide to debriefing a simulation, which I previously mentioned. We have the updated UFE simulations and evaluation guides, and again, various technical resources. We'll also highlight a specific technical resource that's new this year, and it's what we're calling technical moments. And these are short videos that are designed to provide students with additional guidance on some of the more challenging technical topics that they encounter. So students will use all of these tools to prepare for the UFE, and as mentors, you can find them online in the UFE Prep Mentor module that we'll talk more about in a moment. So we're going to cover each of these tools in greater detail now. So the orientation guide summarizes what a student would need in order to prepare for the UFE. And the guide provides an overview of the 3 UFE Prep program components that we just discussed. It would also contain an outline of that binder file that we discussed. It includes a summary of our sample study plan. And it does provide tips on how to select and work with a mentor. And then finally, it also provides some guidance on securing additional support from colleagues and friends and family as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the binder. As I've mentioned, the binder is a tool that we've created to enable students to track their performance on each simulation that they're attempting in their study. And they can note areas that require specific attention. And it's an Excel file, and so it would contain a number of different tabs. And so we'll cover each of these in the next slides. So we have the simulation list, and it outlines each simulation from the 2004 to 2011 UFEs, and it also indicates whether the simulation is used in Module 5 or in the UFE Prep face-to-face sessions or the UFE Prep study plan. And it does provide a suggested time for each of those simulations as well. Okay, and then we have the sample study plan. So the study plan would help students map out what they need to do to prepare for the UFE. And we do recommend that students develop their plan and share it with their mentor prior to them taking their study leave. So we do provide the sample study plan in the binder file. And students can modify this plan to suit their own needs. So again, this is just a suggestion. It's not something that they are committed to following, but it does provide a nice sort of blueprint for the coming months. But again, students can absolutely make changes and make it more suitable to them specifically. So the CASB suggested study plan starts with the last week of May when students first get access to those online resources. And it does list activities right up until the UFE. And we break it out into two different sections. So the first section is for activities that are leading up to that UFE Prep face-to-face session. And then we have a second section that details what's covered each day of the face-to-face session and outlines one or two simulations that students can write and debrief each day, and allocates a little bit of time for technical review as well. So we will discuss kind of the specific activities that are included in the sample study plan a few slides from now. But this is kind of a general overview of what the study plan would include. So then we move on to the tracking tabs. And these tabs would list the simulations in the same order as that simulation list. And then students can note their performance in each competency area. And as they do that, this tab, it would be the grading breakdown in the tracking sheet. It's automatically updated. So again, it's a great tool for being able to track their progress. And in addition to the tracking tabs, we also have, for each competency area, there's a specific tab where students can note some of the topics that are strengths and weaknesses, and also the date that they're reviewing those topics in their technical study. And then finally, we have the reflection tab. And this tab would allow students to kind of look at more the bigger picture for each simulation. So they're looking at themes for each simulation. They're summarizing what they've learned on an overall basis by writing and debriefing that simulation, and also what they're going to focus on for the next simulation they write. So we'll spend a little bit more time on the study plan, and our study plan includes 4 separate activities. So we have writing practice simulations, then we have debriefing simulations, technical study and review, and we also suggest that students do incorporate breaks into their study plan to avoid burnout. So writing practice simulations would enable students to understand the different types of simulation styles that they might encounter, and also develop an approach to answering them, and identifying some of the technical areas that they need to focus on. So Module 5 and the UFE Prep face-to-face session do cover several simulations, and obviously the in-house programs at training offices would as well. The binder does include that list of each simulation from 2004 to 2011 for the UFEs, and indicates also where that simulation, whether it's used in Module 5 or the UFE Prep session or in that suggested study plan. And you can find all of those simulations and the corresponding guides in the online UFE Prep Mentor module. So we've also created a guide to approaching simulations, and in addition to that, we have 2 planning tutorials that would assist students with outlining a case and planning in general. So again, you can find these resources in the UFE Prep Mentor module. And we do have a short presentation that's called Approaching a Simulation, and this provides some further guidance on case writing, and you can find that presentation in the Mentor Center on the CASB's website. So we do recommend that students would be spending as much time debriefing a simulation as they do writing it, because that's where some of the key learning occurs, through the debriefing process. So for each simulation, again, as we've mentioned, the students can track their progress by competency area, by technical area, and for the overall bigger picture as well in that binder file. And the face-to-face portion of UFE Prep does cover debriefing in detail. And we've also created a guide to assist students with debriefing simulations. And you can find this guide in the online UFE Prep Mentor module. So students will have developed a pretty strong technical foundation in modules 1 through 5 or through their master's program, depending on at which point in time they're joining us in the CASB program. And additionally, the face-to-face portion of CASB's UFE Prep program does include some technical review. And so in the weeks leading up to the UFE, students really should be more refreshing their technical skills as opposed to developing them, because they do have that solid foundation already. So as we've mentioned previously, students would be tracking and reviewing their areas of technical strengths and weaknesses in their binder. And we do provide students with access to a number of technical resources. So we have the CAS guides, the ASTI guides, and IFRS guides. And we do have some select technical guides from the first 5 modules as well. So this screenshot right here is pretty much a screenshot from our learning management system, and you can see it lists all the technical resources that are available to students in the UFE Prep online module. And as a mentor, you'd be able to access these in the UFE Prep Mentor module. So again, I did mention technical moments, which are new this year. So they are a series of short videos, and they would be providing some additional guidance on specific technical topics in which students would typically struggle. So as an example, we have a foreign currency technical moment. So these videos are based on some of the more challenging technical areas that would appear in the simulations that students are attempting in the face-to-face session of UFE Prep. So students would be viewing the technical moments prior to attending the face-to-face session, as this might assist them in attempting the simulations. And we also may spend some class time on these as well in the classroom sessions. So the technical moment videos won't be available until about early June, and at that time you'll be able to view them online in the UFE Prep Mentor module. And then finally, to avoid burnout, we do recommend that students study 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday only. And 9 a.m. does reflect the UFE start time, so it is a good idea to get into that habit of starting at this time. We also suggest that students would be building some technical review time into their study plans, and if an unplanned event comes up, or a student just is feeling like they're starting to burn out and they need a bit of time off, they can take these technical review slots as time off from studying, just to get a bit of a break and to recuperate. So we're going to summarize the activities that we've covered so far. So students do get access to CASB's online UFE Prep materials on May 22nd. And then they'll spend late May to mid-July, and that's the period prior to the UFE Prep face-to-face session, preparing for the UFE. And so for students in Module 5, their weekly tasks would be preparing them for the UFE. And in the sample study plan, we also have some suggested alternate activities to help students who are not in Module 5 during this period. And then we have the face-to-face component of UFE Prep, and again, that runs from July 23rd to 27th, and then again, July 30th to August 3rd. Students don't need to do any additional self-directed study in the evenings or weekends during this period. And then students would write the simulated UFE August 7th to 9th, and that would be in actual UFE writing locations wherever possible. And then from about mid-August to early September, students would write and debrief 1 or 2 simulations each day and also allocate some time for technical review as part of their study plan for preparing for the UFE. And then finally, we've got the actual UFE dates, which are September 11th to 13th. So now we'll move on to what you can do as mentors to help your students prepare for the UFE. So before we discuss how specifically you can support your students, we should take a look at some of the typical characteristics of a UFE mentor. So we would recommend that a UFE mentor is someone who recently wrote the UFE because they would need to be prepared to answer any exam-related questions over the coming months. And they should also likely be a strong communicator and be comfortable with giving some open and honest feedback. And to facilitate this honest feedback process, sometimes it is better that the UFE mentor and the student aren't necessarily close friends. And the UFE mentor should also be technically proficient because, again, he or she will be suggesting how students can address some of those technical weaknesses. And then finally, it is beneficial for a UFE mentor to have a bit of a different problem-solving approach from the student, because this would be kind of complementary to the way that the student thinks. And so the UFE mentor would be better able to identify some of those weaknesses and offer suggestions for improvement if they do have a little bit of a different approach. So now we'll get into what you can do to support your students. So at the onset of the relationship, you can review your student's study plan just to understand how they're going to be preparing for the UFE. And also, you can jointly set expectations regarding how you're going to be working with each other over the coming months. Then you can also expect to be answering some technical and exam-related questions that your students might have throughout the summer. And then you should be assessing some of the students' simulations and providing feedback and suggestions on their approach as well as technical skills. And then finally, you'll probably also be providing a little bit of emotional support and be a source of motivation to your student, especially when the going gets tough over the summer. Preparing for the UFE can be tiring, and so I think students do lean on their mentors for this type of support as well. So at the beginning of the mentoring relationship, you and your student together can determine how you're going to engage with each other. So reviewing the student's study plan is helpful at this point, and it does set the stage for what's going to come over the summer. And then with respect to the simulations, you can also decide how many you're going to assess and when the student's going to be submitting the simulations for assessment and when you're going to commit to providing the student with feedback. And then also looking at some of the more like logistic type of things when it comes to meetings. So, how often will you meet? Some do prefer to meet regularly, and then others might only meet on an as-needed basis. And then also how your interactions are going to take place. So, are they going to be in person? Are they going to be, through Skype, through email, on the phone, those types of things. We do recommend that you evaluate 3 simulations. So one would be at the beginning of your student's study, and that evaluation would serve as a benchmark. And then the second would be about 1 to 2 weeks after the sim UFE, and that would gauge your student's progress since the first one. And then finally, about 1 week to maybe 10 days prior to the UFE. And this final one would highlight any areas that your student would need to be focusing on during the final days leading up to the UFE. So again, to summarize, we'll go back to our previous timeline, and we've outlined the student activities in green, and we'll summarize the mentoring activities in red now. So again, early on, you'll review your student's study plan, and then you'll jointly set the expectations for the coming months. You'll also assess and provide feedback on a simulation fairly early in the student's study, because this one's the one that's going to serve as that benchmark. And then after the sim UFE, you'll once again assess and provide feedback on a simulation that's going to gauge your student's progress. And then 7 to 10 days prior to the UFE, you'll assess and provide some feedback on a final simulation. And that will help your student identify pretty much those areas that they should be focusing on in their final days of study. And then throughout the summer, you'll likely be answering some technical and exam-related questions that your student may have, and just offering that general support on an as-needed basis. So next we'll talk about the resources that are available to assist you and your students. And again, all the resources that we have discussed today are available to your students as part of their online component of CASB's UFE Prep program. And they're also available to you as mentors in the UFE Prep Mentor module. So the Mentor module would contain those same resources as the student module has, but the only difference is it doesn't include access to a facilitator. This is something that really only students would require. So in the Mentor module, you'd be seeing that orientation guide, the binder and sample study plan, the guides to approaching and debriefing a simulation, and the related planning tutorials. You'd have all the UFE simulations and evaluation guides from 2004 onward, and the technical guides and tutorials for ASPE, IFRS, and the CASs, and then the select guides from modules 1 through 5. And then the technical moments, as we mentioned, will also be on in the UFE Mentor module, but they won't be available until about early June. So as mentors, you do have 3 sources of mentoring information that are available to you. So we have the Mentor Center, we have the CASB Mentor modules, and the UFE Prep Mentor module. And I'm just going to take a moment to distinguish these 3 from each other. So the Mentor module contains a number of mentoring, the Mentor Center contains some mentoring resources. So we have an overview of some common mentoring practices at CA training offices. We have a general mentoring framework, and that's for mentoring students through modules 1 to 5. And we also have some module-specific mentoring tips for each individual module, and then finally some additional mentoring guidance on more specific topics, so things like case writing and critical thinking and communication, that type of thing. And then any webinars that we hold, we will be posting the recordings and the slides to the Mentor Center as well. So the Mentor Center is located on the CASB website, and it's open to everyone, so you don't need to register to get access to this. And this is simply because we do want to support the mentoring activities that you're carrying out at training offices. And then we have the 2 different types of mentor modules. So we have the CASB mentor modules, and they would contain all the learning materials for modules 1 through 5. So they would provide mentors with access to that same material that students would be engaging with as they complete the first 5 modules. And the CASB mentor modules would also contain links to some of the relevant resources in the Mentor Center. So the CASB mentor modules are housed in Desire to Learn, and that's CASB's learning management system, and they do contain proprietary information, so you do need to register to gain access to the CASB mentor modules. And then the UFE Prep mentor module, which we've discussed in detail today, would contain all the learning materials from CASB's UFE Prep program, as well as links to those relevant Mentor Center resources as well. So that UFE Prep Mentor module provides you with the access to the same materials that your students are using to prepare for the UFE. And it's also housed in Desire to Learn, and also contains some proprietary learning materials. So again, you do need to register to get access to the UFE Prep Mentor module. And so we'll show you how to register for that module. So why would you be registering? So unlike the Mentor Center that we just covered, the UFE Prep Mentor module does contain all the learning materials from CASB's UFE Prep. And registered mentors would also receive advance notice of any UFE mentoring events, such as webinars, like this one today. And you're also informed as new UFE mentoring resources are developed. So to register, you do need to be a qualified CA or a CASB student who has successfully completed the UFE. And we also allow HR contacts and student contacts at CA training offices to register, even if they're not CAs. And this is simply because these people tend to be involved in some of the in-house mentoring programs as well. So it's a good idea to assist them with some learning materials. So to register, what you need to do is complete the UFE Mentor registration application, and that's in the forms section of the CASB website. And then registration is valid until the end of April each year, and we refresh the content in the UFE Prep Mentor module each May. And we will contact registered mentors each spring to renew your registration for the coming year. So basically, you don't have to complete those registration forms every single year, but you just do have to confirm that you want to continue to be registered for the coming year. And we do initiate that process ourselves. And even though we didn't specifically cover the CASB mentor modules in today's session, some of you may also mentor students who are in the first 5 modules. So I'll just take a brief moment to show you how to get access to these modules. So again, these differ from the Mentor Center in that they do contain all the learning materials from modules 1 through 5. And registered mentors do get advance notice of any mentoring events and new mentoring resources. And to register for these, you do have to be a qualified CA or a senior CASB student. So that would mean somebody who is more senior to the student that they're mentoring. So they don't have to have completed the UFE. They can be just in a later module. And similarly, HR contacts and student contacts are eligible to register, even if they're not CAs. And we have a separate registration form for the CASB mentor modules, and it's also in the forms section of our website. So for these modules, you can register anytime, and the content is refreshed with each module offering. And then each year in the fall, we contact people to renew their registration for the coming year. So that covers the formal presentation for today's session. And at this point, we will take your questions. And what I'll do is I'll read the questions out loud, and then Jennifer Reed, the Director of CASB's UFE Prep Program, will be joining us to respond to them. And just as a reminder, we do ask you to submit the questions using the Q&A function on your screen. And also another reminder, just as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, if you do want to download a copy of the slides from today's presentation, you can just click that handouts icon in the top right-hand section of your screen. And it's the one that looks like 3 sheets of paper. And then a final notice is that if you know of people that were not able to attend today's session and you think they might find this useful, we'll be posting a recording as well as the related slides in the Mentor Center on our website as well. So they'll be accessible by the end of the week. We should have something up for you. Okay, so with that, first of all, I just wanted to check and see if Jennifer has joined us. Jennifer, are you there?
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, yes.
Great.
Great, thank you for joining us. Okay.
Thank you.
So let's just head over to the questions here. Bear with me for a moment. Okay. The first question, I think, Jennifer, this actually might be one for me. Does CASB assign mentees to mentors, or do students contact mentors directly? So what we do in terms of this process is basically we leave it up to the student and the training office to arrange their own mentoring relationship. So we don't get involved necessarily in matching students and mentors. We just find that, students kind of prefer to take this on themselves just from a personality perspective and that type of thing, just to make sure that they can work well with their mentors. So we don't get involved in that process, but what we do is provide you with our learning materials and related resources that you can use in that mentoring relationship. Okay, so our next question. Okay, so you note that a mentor should mark a simulation prior to the sim UFE. If our firm provides feedback on simulations prior to the sim UFE, and mentors have access to these, do you think it's still necessary or beneficial to review the student's cases, or would it result in additional unnecessary work for the student? Jennifer.
Yes, well, that's a very good question. If the in-house training program, if the feedback coming out of that program is, detailed enough, I would say that the mentor would not need to review a simulation prior to the student starting with the UFE prep face-to-face, that the in-house feedback could be sufficient, and then the mentor would want to pick up review of that student's work, again, in the week of August 15th to 17th, the first week of the student study, and again in the third week of the student study. So, yes, the mentor's review could be reduced by one simulation.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. And I would say, yeah, the key is just that the mentor's getting some feedback. And so if you do have other mechanisms, you know, that facilitate that process, then absolutely. I think that's a great answer, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Oops. Okay. Well, I think it's quite similar, but I'll read it anyway. Your schedule suggests assessing a case before the face-to-face session. At our office, we've typically had mentors assess the first case after the UFE, the simulated UFE, and then two others, as you suggest. Do you think it's more beneficial to assess the first case before the face-to-face session? Jennifer.
Yes, we do recommend that there is some assessment of the student's performance prior to the face-to-face session, and that's simply to provide a benchmark. So you should be seeing improvement between that first review prior to the face-to-face session and the second simulation that is reviewed in the first week of study. If no improvement is noted, then I think that's you know, an area for concern, and then you would want to focus you know, that student on specific areas of their study, whether that be you know, achieving breadth or achieving depth in certain indicators. So we do recommend that that student be evaluated by the mentor or by, you know, an in-house training program prior to the UFE prep face-to-face.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, and then our next question is, when does a UFE student typically tend to begin their study leave?
That's a very good question. Well, now that does depend on each firm and each student's individual, you know, ability to take time off, et cetera. Obviously, a student's study leave should begin on July 23rd, obviously, for the UFE prep face-to-face. Some students do like to take a week to 2 weeks off prior to the UFE prep face-to-face, again, to work through the suggested materials that we have provided for pre-UFE prep face-to-face study. So those would be review of technical guides, organizing their study schedule, et cetera. But at a bare minimum, the first day of their study leave would be the UFE prep face-to-face on July 23rd.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and our next question. Oh, this is a good one. For the 3 simulations for the mentors to evaluate, which ones would you recommend be comps and which ones should be multis? Jennifer.
Oh, that's a very good question. I would recommend that the benchmark, the very first simulation reviewed by the mentor, be a multi-simulation. I would then recommend that the second simulation that be reviewed, if, again, the mentor has time, would be a comprehensive simulation. And then the third and final simulation being reviewed would be a multi-simulation.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. And here we go. So our next question is, what sort of alternate activities does CASB provide for students who are not currently in Module 5? So that would be the portion of that study plan leading up to the face-to-face UFE prep portion. So Jennifer.
Yes, so CASB does provide a variety of technical guides on the UFE prep site. There are also online tutorials for effectively outlining and approaching a simulation. So those can be completed by students who are not currently in Module 5. As well, we are rolling out the technical moment videos. So we will try to get those before early June, but at the latest, they will be available in early June. So those would provide a starting point for students who are not currently working through Module 5 to focus in on some technical study. So there are a variety of resources. I should also mention there are case walkthroughs available on the D2L site. Now, that being said, they're not up on the mentor site now. They are currently being updated, but they will be available for students on May 22nd. So that's another area that that a student not currently in Module 5 could focus on.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions coming in at this time, so I'm just going to pause for a few seconds to see if we get any more. And if you do think of a question subsequently, I think all of you have my email address, so you can email me directly after the fact, and we'll be sure to get you an answer to any questions that might come to mind afterwards. Okay, so I'm still not seeing any additional questions, so I think with that, we'll just move on to closing today's session. So thank you very much for participating, and you really do play an important role in student development, and CASB is happy to support the activities that you carry out. So a recording of today's session will be posted in that Mentor Center by the end of the week. Thank you very much to Jennifer for addressing questions today, and this concludes today's session.